the Italian Football Podcast.
So only one place to start then, Nima. Milan sacked Paulo Fonseca after their draw against Roma on Sunday evening, 1-1 draw. Pretty farcical sequence of events that led to his sacking on Sunday evening. He spoke to the press after the game and to the television media. Basically not known anything about being sacked, having not even spoken to the club, and then drives away from San Siro after midnight, and then tells the journalists waiting that it's true that he has actually been sacked. Something that all the rest of the media had known hours going into the game, that he was going to be sacked, and that Sergio Conceicao had already been spoken to and basically had already agreed a deal to take over from Fonseca. So that is the end of Fonseca. 12 wins, 6 draws, 6 defeats in his all of his games in all competitions. Pretty much tells the story, really. 8th place in Serie A. It's been really it's been a disaster, really. Let's be honest, by the standards of Milan for Fonseca.
I think we have to look at this from very many different angles. The results haven't been good enough. I mean, just look at their position in the Serie A. There's no doubt about that. They've done well in the Champions League. They're on route for 18 points, which would seal them a spot in the top 8, which is, well, that's pretty good if you take into consideration the draw and all the other stuff, beating Real Madrid away and so on. Excuse me. But for me, there's a couple of angles to this which I want to discuss. And the first one is, aside from being, I can't get away from Milan's directors and Milan's ownership and how Milan are run. There is nothing tactically similar between Paulo Fonseca and Sergio Conceicao, other than they're both Portuguese and football managers. You had such a long time to prepare for post-Pioli. You bring in Fonseca after a bit of a shit show, really, with Lopetegui. You give him a contract, which, according to reports, means that if he's sacked within the first 6 months, he'll only be paid until June 25, which also then tells you you don't really want him. He is given some players that he wants. You give him some sort of a mercato. You don't really address the big issue. I mean, 20 million on Emerson Royal, God bless. It didn't exactly enhance or strengthen Milan. And throughout this entire process, this entire tenure, he has been hung out and left out to dry. The lasting impression from Paulo Fonseca from the Paulo Fonseca tenure at Milan is, this is a man who was a dead man walking from day one. It was someone who this management just appointed and never really backed. He was constantly under fire. He was constantly under pressure. Never once had a director come out and defend him. Never once had anyone in senior management come out and defend the club and, by extension, him, in the way that, which is standard in Italian football when there's problems. You have a coach who really tried everything to turn Milan from Pioli and a team that didn't really have any attacking identity into a team where getting Leao and Theo, especially Leao, to work in a team, in a system, and actually towards the end making it somewhat work. And then you essentially sack him at half-time. You let him go out there, talk to the media, do the rounds post-game, and then you sack him. this is, I don't know if they are just incompetent. I don't know if they are just unorganized. I don't know if they are doing this on purpose to prove a point. But my God, do they come across as a bunch of circus clowns. This on the back of a week where Jerry Cardinale, in this Harvard paper, says one of the dumbest things about crosstown rivals Inter, prompting Beppe Marotta to come out and defecate on his head verbally and embarrass him. And it's just completely, this is what it's been like under him, under RedBird, since he took over. I'm not talking about the financial stuff, which he loves to talk about, and I do think he has a point. I don't think it's that black and white. But when it comes to handling and running a football club of Milan stature, it is watching children. You're given the keys to the Lamborghini to a 9-year-old who's drunk. That's what it comes across like. And it's from the way that they have sacked and got rid of Massara, Maldini, to how they did to treated Fonseca yesterday for the whole world to see, where the coach, for the first time that I can remember, announces his own sacking. I mean, I'm sure it's happened at some point before, but not at a big club like Milan. Is
it's farcical.
truly, truly embarrassing. And I have to say, if I look at Fonseca, we were both against his appointment. I said it the day he was appointed. I think he'll be sacked before, within the next 6 to 8 months. I think he's the wrong appointment. I thought Conceicao or Conte was the right appointment. I thought Sarri was the right appointment. But my lasting impression after having watched Paulo Fonseca these months at Milan is actually far more positive than it was when he was first appointed, because of having watched him trying to impose an attacking identity, trying to make changes and impose things that are going to benefit Milan once someone who's better than him tactically and better suited for this job than he is, who's a strong character like Conceicao. I think it leaves Milan in a better place, but it also shows I have a much higher respect for him as a coach. Tactically, I have a much higher respect for him as a man. And conversely, I have no belief, confidence at all in this current crop of Milan directors in their current roles. I don't think these people could organize a piss up in a brewery.
It's hard to disagree with any of that. To be honest with you, I'm in full agreement. I think there are. Well, I think there's a number of like you said, there's a number of angles to this. I have lots of respect for Fonseca as a person, and I think that's been demonstrated during these very difficult times at Milan, where he has been left alone. He has been working with, like you said, clowns. I mean, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I mean, what an incredible player he was as a player, but my God, he's been embarrassed. It's been embarrassing watching him in this role. Really, really embarrassing. It's unbelievable, really, that they put him in that place. But at the same time, regardless of all that, Fonseca was never good enough for Milan, and nothing that we've seen has changed that. Yes, he's tried everything. He's been left in a really difficult position to work with, working alone. Clearly, he doesn't get on with Zlatan. I think that's obvious they don't have a good relationship, and I don't blame Fonseca for not liking Zlatan. The way that he's tried to undermine him, going into the training ground, giving speeches to the players without even without Fonseca even knowing, going above his head. Fonseca saying one thing to the media that they're not going to buy any more players in the transfer market a few days before the summer window closes, and then Zlatan, a couple of hours later, tells the media that he decides, not Fonseca decides, when the transfer market is closed. Like these kind of things, it made it difficult for him to work, and that's before we even get to the playing staff as well, where he's got a bunch of individualists who are, like you said, they're like children, the likes of Rafael Leao and Teo Hernandez and Tomori and Tammy Abraham, and the way that these players have behaved, it's been very, very difficult. But at the same time, it's up to the coach to be able to take control, certainly of his playing staff.
But he has done that. The problem is
I disagree. He hasn't done that.
I think he has done that. He has done everything he can. When he needed to and show to Teo and Leao that their behavior was unacceptable, he did that. When he needed to do that to Teo, he did that. He has done all of that. The problem is,
it shouldn't have got there in the first place. A coach wouldn't get there in the first place.
You can't just put that square on the feet of the coach. The problem has been that he's been undermined from day one, exactly like you said. The players aren't stupid. They also read the papers. They also follow what's happening in the news. And they probably also talk to their agents. And given that they're all insiders in the club, they probably know also what's happening. Such as, you give a contract to a coach and say, if we're not happy with your work within 6 months, we'll sack you and you only get paid for the following 6 months. You have a situation where he comes out, like you said, we're not going to buy anyone. He says, I decide, not him. Like, I know that it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but again, he has been undermined continuously from the very first minute that he was appointed. And he has handled that situation with grace. I
agree. This on the personal side.
I'm not talking about personal. I'm talking also from a professional point of view. Of course, he's made mistakes. Look, again, I did not want this man at Milan. I thought it was a mistake tactically. I think he's too naive defensively for the Serie A, and definitely for a club of Milan's stature. I think it's been too inconsistent. Top 4. I mean, the season was pretty much over before it started. Top 4 is, is going to be hard. It's still doable, but the Scudetto's already over. It's been over for a month. Like, again, all of these things I get, but there's nuance here. You can't, the way that they have undermined their own appointment from day one is just mind-boggling. Then why'd you appoint him to begin with? Conceicao was already there in the summer. Like, do you see what I'm saying? It makes no sense.
Well, this is where, again, I separate. I mean, listen, yeah, from a personal point of view or from a media point of view, the way that he handles himself in front of the media, the way that he handles himself in the face of adversity, after bad results, after things go wrong, after players do things that they shouldn't do, the way that he's handled all that, I think, has been exemplary. I've got no complaints there, and that reinforces what I think of him as a person, which is, I think he's a great guy, and I feel sorry for him on that level. But from a how good is he as a coach? As we both said when he was appointed, he's not good enough for Milan. This is a level too high from him. And yes, it's been very, very difficult for him with all these other things, no doubt about that. But his whole career has shown, up until taking over at Milan, that he wasn't good enough for Milan. So these other circumstances, yes, they made it even more difficult for a person that already wasn't good enough. And that's really that's the bottom line, to be honest with you. Look at the numbers. I mean, in Serie A this season, 7 wins, 6 draws, 4 defeats from 17 games. Scored 26 goals in 17 games, conceding 17 goals. They've got 27 points from 17 games. They're 14 points off the top of the table, 16 if Inter win their game in hand. And we're only 17 matches, not even halfway through the season, and he's already, possibly 16 points off the top of the table, and he's 8 points off the top 4. So I mean, it's not good enough. The performances have not been good enough.
Absolutely not.
And that's the bottom line. And he isn't good enough. He's not good enough for a big club. And so I think that
I
that
agree
doesn't
with that.
change. That
I
doesn't
agree with that.
change regardless of all the difficult things he has had to deal with, and then that's where
No.
Milan made the mistake. They should never have hired him.
Well, that's precisely my point. I can't. I agree with all of that. Like we both said at the time, go back and listen to that episode when he was appointed. What we all said. I mean, I listened to it yesterday. Everything we said, both of us said, has happened on that pod. Like it's not even. It's there. Go back and listen. But the issue is, once you make a decision to hire someone, you have to give them the tools to be able to do a job. You have to be able to create an environment for that person to do their job. And you can't do that when you undermine and humiliate the person you chose to appoint from day one. So this is just, I fully understand Milan fans being furious with the owners and the directors. It feels like Scaroni is the only one who knows what he's doing. He's the only one, but he's kind of been relegated almost now to trying to maintain the peace and keeping some form of professionalism in very difficult times. The rest of them, directors, and Jerry himself, is when it comes to running a football club and a football club of Milan's stature, are clueless. Again, the finances, sure, great. They've done a fantastic job, and I agree with his vision of football, and many of the things he says are wise. But he's a business guy. He doesn't understand what club and what he's bought and where he is, and that's the problem. You know, when you have an owner, I always think of Gordon Ramsay when he talks about restaurants and people who buy restaurants who don't know anything about restaurants and thinks it's easy, you just put food on a plate and go out with it. That's how it feels with Jerry Cardinale. He looks at numbers and go, well, I know this side of it, but he doesn't have a goddamn clue about what a football club is. He doesn't have a goddamn clue how to run a football club. He doesn't have a goddamn clue how a football club of Milan stature is supposed to be run. He has bought something of which he understands nothing about, other than the numbers, which I'm sure he's good at and he's great at, and he'll probably, it'll be difficult if they miss the Champions League, but I'm sure that he'll resolve the finances side of it. There's no doubt about that. But there's more to it than that. And this, so far, every decision they've made is wrong.
There was more opposition yesterday from the fans. Certainly, especially at the start of the game, more calls for him to sell the club, and massive opposition. They're not happy with him at all.
But I got to say one thing though. I think one saving grace for them, if they actually appoint Sergio Conceicao, because Sergio Conceicao is not Fonseca. Sergio Conceicao is Mourinho, Conte. He goes to war. If he's not happy, look, talk to Porto fans and journalists who cover Porto. There's a famous picture, or a famous before and after picture of Porto's sporting director 1 week before and after the transfer window closes. I think it was 2 seasons ago, when Conceicao had been promised things on the transfer market, and he was fuming in the media about it, and fried the sporting director. There's a before and after picture of the summer and after. The guy had aged 25 years because Conceicao had destroyed him. Like, this is who Conceicao is. He's a fighter. He goes in there with a blowtorch to everyone and anyone who doesn't show commitment, professionalism, desire, hunger. He's tactically very defensively solid. He knows how to build a group. He knows all of these things. Just the mentality monster that he is. So I do think we're going to see a Milan with much more fight, much more grit, but at the same time, they need to also back up whatever promises they have made to Sergio Conceicao. Because if they don't, oh my God, This guy does not mess about. He doesn't mess about.
Yeah. I mean, this is where it will be interesting with Conceicao when he comes in, if he is able to control the group of players in a way, or get the respect of the group of players, and or get them at least fulfilling exactly what he wants on the pitch in a way that Fonseca was never able to do. We'll see, because if Conceição can do that, then obviously that's an indictment on the inability of Fonseca to be able to do that, which is something that I've always thought he's just doesn't have. He obviously doesn't have that in him to be able to the things that happened earlier in the season with the players, like with the cooling break, with Leao and Teo, with the penalty incident with Pulisic, Tammy, and Tomori. These kind of things don't happen in clubs where the manager has the total control and respect and influence over his players. I wouldn't expect that to happen under certain level of coach. We'll see. From what I've seen of Conceição on the outside, I would expect him to be able to control the dressing room fully in a way that probably Fonseca hasn't been able to do. Having said that, though, if he's not able to do that, then that probably reflects well on Fonseca, because it shows that, well, Conceição couldn't do it either. He couldn't control the dressing room. He couldn't take control. But what does remain is obviously the problems above Conceição's head, like with the directors and the way that the club's being led that way. That isn't going to change. So we'll have to see. I think from a point of view of trying to rescue Milan's season, get them in the top four, this was a decision that had to be made, and I would expect Milan to certainly improve. Certainly to start with, there's always a new manager bounce always. So I would expect Milan's form to continue. I think their first game is in the Super Cup against Juventus. So I mean, yeah, a bit
Father meets son. Yeah.
Father meets son. Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, it's a bit of a Mickey Mouse kind of competition, but I guess it's a way for him to kind of slowly bed in and treat them as training sessions, I guess, those games. But I think it's a decision that had to be made, because with Fonseca, Milan clearly weren't going to get into the top four. There's no doubt about that.
No, there's no doubt about that. And
Mm.
again, the reason why I'm not hammering Fonseca on this is because we kind of expected it. Again, go back and listen to the pod we made about when he was appointed and all the criticisms and concerns we both had then, and every single thing has come to pass. So I don't want to repeat myself. So I just refer back to that. But I do think that what has happened since then is also very important, because things don't happen in a vacuum. And he really did, when the words he said, "I have a clear conscience, I gave it my all." I believe that. I don't think no one who has followed this situation can question that. And it's strange because, as I said, I think he actually comes out of this looking better than he did going into it, which is very rare when you're a coach who's just been sacked. It's not like when Rudi Garcia was sacked, and it's that just goes to show that I think that he didn't do a good job. He failed where we expected him to fail, but he also did better in some regards. And the fact that he was the person who tried and began the process of transforming this Milan after Pioli, at least in the attacking phase, into a team with clear patterns, which Pioli never had, is, even though it caused a lot of turbulence with Leao and so on, seemingly, then, that's something that is a very important work that has begun. And I'm sure that Conceição will build upon that. I don't think that the problems in terms of the players have disappeared, but we do know who Conceição is as a character, who we do know how he is as a person. He goes to war. He's a warrior. He's not a gentleman in like that. This is a man who once beat up a spectator because he was mocking his son whilst he was there watching his son play youth football. This is who Conceição is. He doesn't take shit from anyone. And he goes to battle, and he's prepared to almost quote unquote die for the group. But he expects that kind of commitment and loyalty back, not just from the players, but also from his directors.
Yeah, I think the other key, massive part of this of Conceicao taking over at Milan is it also is the Milan also giving the keys to Jorge Mendes, having a big influence over Milan. He's the agent of Conceicao, and but he's also the agent of Rafael Leao. I think Emerson Royale as well. So what we are seeing is Jorge
FC
Mendes.
Jorge Mendes.
Yeah, we're seeing.
Mensch, as
We're
Patrick
seeing.
Kendrick will probably send me a message about pronunciation of Portuguese names.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is Mendes. And it's not just Milan. We're seeing how much influence he's now getting on Italian football as a whole, because we're also seeing it at Juventus, because Sergio Conceicao's son is at Juventus, but also Mendes is trying to take, and he publicly gave a statement the other day about bringing Antonio Silva from Benfica to Juventus, basically saying that he wants to join Juventus. I mean, I don't know if that will happen. He's too expensive. But again, this is the influence that Mendes is now exerting over two of the three biggest clubs in Italian football. So this is Mendes also. We're starting to see Mendes going to be a big key decision maker at Milan going forward, and that's not always a good thing.
No.
So because Mendes has his own
agenda,
and that is obviously making money and consolidating power and money at clubs rather than the actual success of those teams on the pitch. And so getting his players at those clubs. Yeah.
We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll have to wait and see what it goes. But I do think that Sergio Conceicao is a better decision than Fonseca, and he should have been appointed in the summer if they didn't want Maurizio Sarri, who I still maintain would have been the ideal solution.
Yeah.
Tactically.
Yeah, for sure.